Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Our speaker today is Amy Miller, who's the director of the Vajrapani Institute, which is a beautiful Tibetan practice and retreat center in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The GVF retreat was held there last year. If you'd like to know, by the way, more about what's going on there, the newsletter of the Institute is out in the table in the foyer. Amy has been a student of Tibetan Buddhism in Asia and America and a teacher for 10 years. And the title of her talk is For Happiness, Cherish Others. And David Sincere would like to say something too.
Just wanted to thank you for being here very much, and also to say just a little bit about how thankful I am and all GBF has been for the last couple of years for being able to have our retreats at Vajrapani. And also, not only you, but so many people who have put work and energy and practice into Vajrapani. It's a very important and wonderful practice place. And I just wanted to express that to you. I appreciate your practice of taking care of it. It's really wonderful and important. And I know it's not easy. It's really nice to see you too. Glad you're here.
Thank you very much, everyone. I wanted to say personally that there's two things going on for me in this room right now. I mentioned to my friend coming up the steps that I interviewed for the Zen Hospice here, and I said, I think this is the Zen Hospice building. And when I did come for the interview, I remember walking into this room and briefly, and at that time I was living and working at Chen Ling Center, the center that started in Noe Valley, some of you are familiar with. And I remember walking in and saying, oh, this is a great room for a program or something, immediately, because we were so squished. And so anyway, here we are, which is really nice. And GBF, for me, has a really special place in my heart, and it's really nice to come here and see a lot of people that I met when we were starting the center in Noe Valley. And I think GBF was starting around the same time, so it was really exciting. And we went to sort of similar things, and I think did the AIDS walk and a lot of things like that. So it's really nice to see some of you and to see how GBF's developed now. It's really wonderful. It's great. So for Happiness, Cherish Others, I will talk about today this seven-fold cause and effect relationship about a Tibetan Buddhist term, Bodichitta, which means the mind of awakening. Basically, Bodhi is enlightenment or awakening, and Chitta is mind, or in Tibetan it's often, the mind is actually here in the heart, so it's sort of heart-mind, in this mind of awakening or mind of enlightenment. And it deals with this altruistic intention or attitude that is one of the fundamental principles of Tibetan Buddhism, of cherishing others more than yourselves. So I actually now have a bumper sticker on my car that's down the street that says, for happiness, cherish others, that was actually made by my teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who's currently at Vajrapani on a quick visit. And it has actually caused me to drive differently. So instead of the maniac that I normally am, so it really does have that effect. And I just wanted to discuss a few things here, which would be nice to go through. These are tools. Tibetan Buddhism is very practical, and some of you are probably familiar with some of the terminology that I'll go through. Tibetan Buddhism is very practical, so these are exercises and tools that you can apply in your life which is something I'm really interested in now, and at Vajrapani, of how do you really integrate the practice into your life. It's not sort of enough for me to say, well, I'll sit every Sunday and that's enough. I want to make sure that it works and that it's happening. And so these are tools that you can go through, and as you contemplate them in either a daily practice or on a meditation retreat or whatever, it does have an effect on your mind stream. So basically, to develop bodhicitta, you need sort of incredible compassion that you cannot bear the suffering that others are going through. And you're also going through your own suffering. And basically, we have a Buddhist term, samsara, Tibetan Buddhist term some of you have heard of, which is this cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So the nature of samsara is suffering. It's very hard for a lot of us to see it that way, because it's like a prison, but some of our prisons look pretty nice. My prison at Vajrapani has beautiful redwood trees, and it's very quiet, and there's deer, and yet there's still a level of suffering there. It's not going to bring me ultimate happiness, these things. So that's what samsara is about, and it translates into a lot of different things in life. So basically, you first, have this awareness of this suffering, and that you really cannot bear it. So that's where the beginning of bodhicitta, the seed, comes from. And so in order to really develop this sort of compassion, this special sort of compassion, is you really have to understand the beginning of the nature of suffering and how samsara exists. So that's one of the fundamental things about it. But the ways to develop bodhicitta, I'll go through these 7 different points and then the ultimate result. So the first one is practicing equanimity. And we often do a meditation in Tibetan Buddhism called Friend, Enemy, Stranger. Some of you are probably familiar with. And it's very easy for us to know how we feel about our friends and how attached we feel to them, and how if their car is cutting in front of you on the freeway, you're a lot more likely to let them in, But if it's somebody you don't know, forget it. So the friend is very obvious to understand. The enemy is pretty obvious as well. The person that really annoys you, the person at work that everybody sort of, it's his fault, he did this, And the stranger are people, you're just waiting in line at the ATM. You don't know these people. Never saw them before. You may never see them again. You have no feeling one way or another. So it would be really interesting to take the feeling you have for your friend, the feeling you have for your loved one, and move that into the enemy, and move that to the stranger. How would that feel? And you can do it while you're standing at the ATM. Maybe this person is taking a little bit longer than I would like. What's going on there? They've been up there punching buttons for a while, and they should have their cash ready. But, what if that what if that was my sister or my brother there? Maybe I'd go up, I'd joke with them, or maybe I just hang out thinking, So it's really interesting for the mind to watch that. And the enemies, it's harder to do, but it works really well. The enemies as well. And so that's a beginning thing, is that you have to have this premise that everybody's the same, and that you basically feel the same towards everybody. So it's difficult. I'm not going to say this happens overnight, but this is the beginning. This would be point number 1. Point number 2, Tibetan Buddhism, point number 2 is understanding that all sentient beings, which are beings with a consciousness, a mind, have been your mothers at some point, have been your mother, your specific mother. And Tibetan Buddhism talks about a continuum of consciousness, a mind, like a spaghetti noodle that never ends, connected, going. So I go on from this form, into another life when I die. So the Amy dies, but the consciousness will continue. And it's beginningless, this nature. So as a result, we've been everything. We've had an opportunity to be everything. It doesn't mean you've been a Buddha, because you still have obscurations. So until you clear all the obscurations, you will take some sort of rebirth, usually uncontrollably, into some sort of realm of existence. As a result, we've been everything to each other. And if you can somehow get into a space where you see that everyone's been your mother, some of us don't have great relationships with our mothers. So the Tibetan Lamas came to the West and they say, you think of the kindness of your mother. And people say, my mother beat me, or my mother, it hasn't been very pleasant. But basically, when you do look at the realm or the relationship of mother and child or mother and young, Vajrapani, we live in the middle of the woods. There's a lot of animals. And when I see the length that these animals go through to take care of their young, with, rattlesnakes out there, and there's bigger animals that could, tangle with them, and the raccoons, and they're out there all night sometimes, just hovering over this little batch of kittens, just on that level. I think of little birds, the way they feed, they go out all day feeding these little baby birds and things, and a lot of our mothers have been, in this life, in the human form, have been really kind to us. So I think in that realm, when you look at that kindness and feel like, well, if you've been my mother, you're going to have a very different relationship to that enemy that's cutting in front of you on the freeway type of thing. So that's another application, is to see it like that. The third point is remembering the kindness. So then you can do a meditation on taking a moment, whatever, if in the morning, whenever you sit, and just remembering the kindness that you can recall, and it's obviously really helpful in this lifetime to go through your own life, the kindness of your own particular mother. Maybe she wasn't good to me when I was an adolescent or something, but just carrying me for 9 months in her stomach, and all the things that mothers go through trying to be healthy, and bearing children, and getting born and things like that, and then caring, and all the things that they did to care for us and raise us and teach us and make sure that we didn't, fall down and hurt ourselves or burn ourselves with things. And so you can go through the whole thing, as well as what our mothers do for us today and how they're really there for us, people that have that experience. So that's a really nice one to actually go through and think about specific experiences of what is their kindness about? How do they practice their kindness? The fourth point is repaying their kindness. Some of the things are, if your mother were walking near a cliff that maybe she's blind and she doesn't see, you're going to run out there and you're going to stop her. You're going to try to make sure she's safe. So there's many levels of this in life, of the mother, that person, that kind, dear person, or the person we're trying to visualize as being kind and dear, as being in some sort of suffering situation or some precarious situation that they're ignorant of, that we can help them. It's really up to us. We have it in us to do that. It can be leading someone away from a busy street, or carrying packages for an old parent, things like that, or a lot of us are going through caring for parents and grandparents in old age now. And this is a big one for people. How do we do that? It's an incredible way of repaying the kindness. Whether you do it yourself or you can set them up in a situation where they're cared for. That's one thing. As well as on an ultimate level, if you can bring the Dharma to them in some way, whether there are a lot of parents that come with siblings to teachings, with children. Maybe they'll meet your teacher. Maybe they come to a lecture. Maybe you introduce one aspect of meditation to them, is an incredible beneficial way to repay the kindness. So, and it's really nice. And even if this parent is maybe in a nursing home or dying, there's even ways of going in, and I know we're in the right sort of building for this, of caring for the sick and the dying, in a very subtle way, is being there in your Dharma with them and giving them that space, is an incredible way to repay the kindness for them. So, and you don't even need to impose, if they happen to be devoutly Catholic, it's not a matter of imposing, well, you have to visualize the Buddha now, they'll say, the Buddha? I don't know anything about a Buddha. But of just bringing in loving kindness to them, things like that is really, really powerful. Let's see if there's anything else here. Repaying their kindness. So on another level, I think of if the mother's child isn't going to help, isn't going to repay or warn the person about the danger, like who will do it? It's really up to us, especially in that role when you see everyone as your mother. The fifth point is love through the force of attraction. So we're starting to expand a little bit now in this. So you can use, thinking of your mother in this, and you can also use trying to see all sentient beings as my mother. So how do these things work? So love through the force of attraction is about being attracted to all sentient beings. And on one level, as your mother, that's how you're seeing. But also, what if they were your children? Because you've been their mother as well. If they've been your mother, you've been their mother. These are the teachings in Tibetan Buddhism. So think about that love that people have. Some of you have children here, what that love is like. Or the people that you do love, and having that incredible attraction to sentient beings, to all of them, to everybody. The guy at the ATM, and that's taking too long, and all the different people. So really practicing that one. The sixth point is we're going to start into compassion here. Compassion and great compassion. So compassion is wanting others to be free of suffering. It's pretty basic. Love is wanting people to be happy. That's what love's about. But compassion is wanting them to be free of suffering. And the greater the compassion you start, I think a lot of us, we've had some programs at Vajrapani about socially engaged Buddhism. When you're reading the newspaper and you're turning the pages and there's these atrocities of, right now I think one of the big things is Big Mountain. They're trying to relocate and take the land of these people. So what happens to you when you read these stories? It's horrible. And sometimes you get this overwhelming feeling. I want to save these people. I want to help these people. They're starving or they're dying. I want to do something. So the compassion sort of grows. First, you have this idea, I want to free others from suffering. I really don't want anyone to suffer. Probably everyone in this room feels that way. But then it starts to grow. And so just let it grow out there as you're doing these meditations, starting to feel like, well, what if this person that I'm meditating on, the experience has been my mother, I really don't want them to suffer anymore. And it starts to move intellectually from here down to here. And it takes some time. So that's the sixth point. The seventh point is altruism. And these all sort of build one upon the other. So altruism is about that you have the responsibility. It's not just about reading the paper and having the feeling I want to free them from suffering, but it's my responsibility to free them from suffering. And so is there a way to involve myself? If I'm reading something in the paper, is there a way to engage myself? For some people, it's going to be personally on their cushion. For some people, I know someone who went to where this land where they're doing, he went there this weekend to go and be with them. That works for some people. It's not about laying trips on people or on yourself that I'm not doing enough. How come he's not doing anything? How come he didn't go to the march or they don't sit? Or, it's about really inside yourself. And I know that His Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about universal responsibility. And that's what this is about. It's about, waking up in the morning and not deluding yourself, but being really clear about what are you able to do with that day that you're alive. I have one more day, I'm alive today, so how am I going to make it meaningful? And Bodichitta is an incredible basis to start the day, is just thinking about cherishing others more than myself. Cherishing others, And the more that you practice and try to have that altruistic intention, it does start to develop. So you start to plant a seed and then you put a little bit of water on it, a little bit of water, and then it starts to grow. So that's what the altruism is about. The result of these 7 causes, ultimately when practiced, and initially as a seed, is bodhicitta. They will result in this. Obviously in the beginning we're quite limited. We'll say, well, I've been meditating on it, but then I turned around, at the guy at work and I yelled at him, and all I was thinking about was myself. That's okay. It takes, I think of how many years have some of us been alive, so you have that many imprints of not practicing bodhicitta, so it's definitely going to take some time. So then there's another way of looking at them, is working backwards from them. So basically, just have a better understanding of their relationship. So before you can achieve this fully awakened state of unlimitedly serving others, wanting to benefit others, you have to have the altruism to want to take responsibility for helping them. So in order to develop, you can't really develop the altruism if you don't have some degree of the compassion that you can't bear the suffering that they're experiencing. So in order to generate the compassion, you have to generate love through the force of attraction. That you're so attracted to these sentient beings that you really couldn't bear to see them suffer. And then preceding that is the love through the force of the attraction, is basically thinking of ways that they're incredibly kind, and how can I repay their kindness? What are good ways to repay their kindness? Because basically they're incredibly dear to me. They've been incredibly kind to me because they basically have been my mother at some point. So I have this incredible feeling that they've taken care of me on some level, and that all sentient beings, I have that experience with all sentient beings. So there's the equanimity in the very beginning, how it starts. So it's just sort of working backwards to show you a little bit of a relationship. And let's see, we can take some questions. I had just a couple of quotes. One of them, this is an incredible book, The Way of the Bodhisattva, or A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, by an ancient Buddhist saint, Shantideva. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of him. It's a great book. And a friend just gave it to me, so I was looking through it last night, and there's one thing, it says, those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and other beings should interchange the terms of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. So I was thinking about that last night, and I thought, it's not that mysterious. If you probably, just looking at places in your life, for me, when I'm unhappy, I find I'm incredibly self-absorbed a lot. A lot of times we have obstacles that come up, no matter what kind of service we're doing. But sometimes when I'm really sort of getting into like a big depression, I can't stop thinking about myself. That's all that's going on for me. The more I go through that experience, and if you see people around you, they're having trouble, or they're complaining, or they're never satisfied, it's a lot, the trip sort of ends here for them with their view. As soon as I can stop for a second and just turn one fraction of my experience to somebody else, it starts to lift the whole mood. And I've done a lot of work like that, looking at that, and I can't hold on to the depression as long as I'm thinking about other people. It completely transforms it. So, I've even had experiences of just, in some sort of terrible mood I've been in, of just buying a friend flowers. I just somehow passed this flower thing, okay, maybe I didn't buy them with the greatest intention. I was like, okay, I'll get them flowers. But somehow in the act of giving the flowers and seeing how happy they are. Or one time, this old woman that lived upstairs, I carried her groceries upstairs for her, and I was not in a very happy space at the time. But she was so happy. And even if they're not so happy, it's just this help that you give them, and then it just starts to transform. So that's an interesting exercise to try. Some of you probably have, of in the bad moods and the anger and the snits and the depressions and things like that, is moving that a bit. And I wanted to take some questions now on these 7 points, and then I didn't know if I had a meditation that I could also lead that fits into this, or we could go with some questions and things like that. And
perhaps it would be nice to have some questions.
Sure, and then we could have, great. If anyone has any questions.
In the tradition, in my tradition, the Soto Zen tradition, there's the idea. It's not really an idea, but we have to use language, so we talk about that of when you're caring for others completely and fully, and giving yourself to the situation completely and fully. There isn't any them and there isn't any I anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's our definition, one of the definitions of compassion, or even of enlightenment, mm-hmm. or wisdom, all mixed up. Mm-hmm. So is that something like? Is that something like? Was Bodichitta that? I mean, is it some non-intellectual, non-emotional state, or is it something else?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's
a big question.
From my understanding, it's a bit of both. Bodhicitta, I'm giving you sort of one side of enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism. Bodhicitta is the method, the skillful means. So how you get enlightened. And what you need with that, the other part of it, is actually bodhicitta, I would say, is on the right hand. But the left side would be emptiness, which is the profound view of reality to Buddhists. You need both of these to sort of shoot through. So you need the heart, this way that you practice. Some of it would be, I think, in a space of emptiness. It would all have to be realized in emptiness, ultimately. And in that space, there's no separation of I and others. Initially, when you're practicing, it's good to think about, because we're very clear about who I is, I think, from when we wake up in the morning. It's the others that we don't really care to focus on as much. So when I'm having an experience or someone's annoying me, well, what if that was me? I'm at the ATM and I'm having some trouble. So that's where there is a division. But Tibetan Buddhism wants to get away from the duality ultimately, at an ultimate level. And that's where the bodhicitta would arise spontaneously. And on some level it would be beyond emotion. On some level you could still be in this space of emptiness where you're feeling there's an interconnectedness with everything. And you could have tears running down your face in the realization of it. Does that answer your question to some degree?
Some of us came from childhoods which were not so gentle and kind. And therefore the reference to our mothers may not be so easily dealt with. What is your suggestion for overcoming that?
Part of it was the part I mentioned about sometimes watching animals and what they do with their kind. Some people that live in the city obviously don't see that very much. Another thing is if you have experiences of other people's parents and what they've done for them, other friends right now that might be raising children and how they extend themselves for those children. Or also if you have somebody dear to you that you've ever been in a parental relationship with, or you just love them so much that you would dive in front of a bullet for them type of feeling, you start to be able to get a little bit of that feeling of what would it have been like had the mother in this life had that kind of kindness. So sometimes that helps to relate it to other. Yeah.
You talked about achieving. I know achieving is another word, but attaining bodhicitta through daily interactions with other people and through activities you do on a daily basis. I wonder if you talk about the role of meditation plays in attaining bodhicitta.
Yeah. Now that I'm living at a retreat center, I think I value meditation even more. I find, I'd have to speak personally about it, meditation really, it sort of sets up these bookends around my day. So I really try to sit every morning and every night. And without that, I get really cranky, I find. And the other thing is that I feel like somehow in the path you need a little bit of both. You need a little bit of daily involvement with people and service. And then I need to have time for myself that I can go back through my day. What did I do today? Well, I yelled at somebody, but I was really good to that other person. And, and sort of have a review and think about some of these points more deeply that I can't do as I'm driving the car or talking with people. So meditation gives me an opportunity to go more deeply into these points. And also, in a sense, sometimes to memorize certain of them, use them as tools, so that when it comes up in daily life, I have a staff person in front of me yelling at me about something, that I know right then, suddenly something more naturally will come as an antidote to apply to it right then. If I'm not meditating enough about it, I'm not integrating them into my mind stream. So I'm sort of verbally, like I might read something in a book and go, well, I read the other day, Shantideva says this, if somebody gets angry at me, and yet it feels like it hasn't gone as deeply, so that meditation makes it more natural. It starts to come more naturally. And you also get, it's a way of knowing yourself better. You need to understand how your mind works, first off, before you can even start to really reach out there to other people. So I find there needs to be, there are some people that have predisposition to being meditators. They're people that they can go away in an isolated retreat for many years and meditate, and that's maybe the most beneficial thing they can do in their lives. That's fine. Some people are really afraid to meditate. It's very scary, or to be in silence, or things like that. And I find it does help if you can even start, even if it's 5 minutes a day, to just be still for 5 minutes. It is very, very helpful, especially in this world where we're all doers and, we have to run around and things like that. It's very, very helpful. And you'll start to have a little bit more calm in you, and people want to be around that. They want to know what you have. How does that work? So I think it also relieves stress on that level. Yeah, and so as far as these points and things, this is one type of meditation on developing bodhicitta, and there are other types. And what you can do is add one or something in a meditation session, like maybe just focus on one thing, equanimity, or seeing others as your mother type of thing, and just focus on that for a month or a year or whatever works in your lifestyle, and there will be a difference. It definitely does make a difference, and without it, I find it's a little bit like half the story. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It was very loving kindness to others. I wonder if you could address loving kindness to oneself. I can be very hypercritical to myself, and abusive to myself in a way I've never been abusive to somebody else. And I treat myself unkindly in a way I've never been treating somebody else. And in a way, it's almost like a machine. It isn't like something I can engage in rationally and say, well, what you're saying or doing right now really isn't fair. So why don't you rethink that before you attack me again? Mm-hmm. It has like a mindless in a bad sense aspect to it, where it just is a culture thing. And I wondered how you could address that.
And so the being kind to yourself also is because
a lot of it isn't. I mean, a lot of what I hear about is like compassion to others, but in some ways people are most vicious and brutal to themselves in a way that
right.
that is worse than sadism.
Right, because no one else here can relate to that, right? No. This is, I think that in Western society, we just love to beat ourselves up, and it's pretty sad. And there's a whole self-esteem thing that goes on that, and Lama Yeshe, who was one of the founding lamas of Vajrapani, who died in 1984, was a very flamboyant, extroverted Tibetan lama, very untraditional, and that was one of his biggest things. He's just like, you Westerners, you just think you're horrible. All the guilt and, constantly. So there's something about our society that it's not okay to feel good about yourself. It's not okay to look in the mirror and say, I'm attractive and I love myself. I mean, there's all this guilt that goes along. The Tibetan language does not have a word for guilt, which is really interesting. Yeah, and it's really a neat, right? And it's great because I love how, we were talking the other day, there's a young Rinpoche, a young Toku, like a highly realized Lama, young one, 11 years old, living at a neighboring house. And his attendant, who's in his 50s or 40s or 50s, has been living in the house for a couple of months, and he helps with the family, and he washes dishes, and he's been chipping all of their dishes, not realizing it. So the people who are in the house, the father's American, the mother's Australian, they have 3 kids. one day he said, I have to tell him about this. I don't want him to feel bad. And he said, Tenzin, you're chipping the dishes. Could you just be a little bit more careful? And he just said, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sure. That was the end of it. I would have been there obsessing. They hate me. I wash dishes lousily. They want me to move out. It's amazing. Like one little criticism and you ruined my month. And he just was like, okay, thanks for telling me. Great. And that was the end of it for him. So there is this thing that we love to lay these trips. So renunciation, which is the beginning of the path, basically, is having compassion for yourself. Renunciation is about giving up worldly pleasures. One level, people say renunciation, shaving my head and giving up, all these different things, whatever it is. It can be different things for different people. For some people, it's giving up drugs and alcohol. For some, it's giving up music or just leading a renounced life, leading a simple life. And you can have all those things. You just don't have attachment to them. But renunciation is really the beginning of having compassion for yourself, because you sort of acknowledge a path of renunciation because you start to understand a little bit more the nature of samsara, this suffering. And you have to begin with yourself. So it doesn't mean that you just focus on yourself and that you don't serve others or you don't do anything for other people, but you have to have compassion. You're a sentient being too. And I have a big problem with this because I'll do all these things for other people, and then I'll just brutalize myself. I'm no good, and that doesn't work. So I've really been working and changing that lately. That I deserve it too. Or I deserve to take care of myself. I deserve to go to the beach today, and I deserve to have a good time there, and not to feel guilty about it. Or because then you're going to have. I'm sorry, and that's right. Capable, and if you're capable of being loved, you're capable of loving. Both of them go hand in hand. And that you're also, the thing is, if you do take care of yourself, you're probably going to have more to give to others. Without that basis, then it does break down after a while. Without the basis of my wanting to help others, if I wasn't really going to help myself and be kind to myself, after a while it became very superficial. That underneath I really wasn't helping them. That wasn't the intention. Yeah. So don't beat yourselves up. I have to tell myself that. I had another. Yeah, this is more along the lines of Bodichitta too. Just a little. He writes these beautiful little stanzas that, and I found another one that I really enjoyed. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. So, yeah, which I really liked. And it's also mainly about the part of not laying trips is not to feel, well, people are starving in Bosnia, or, that's my fault. That's a little obsessive compulsive. A cousin of mine who's a psychiatrist was talking about this recently, that a woman came to him and felt that she had gotten some sort of disorder, imbalance, and it ended up that because of her lighting a spark on her stove, she thought she created the forest fires in Southern California last year or something, So it's not to say that you're the cause of it, but to really look at your own. First of all, the universe is first yourself, and then it expands out. And if you do create some peace in this thing right here, then I have changed the world on that level. And then I can start in maybe my home, and then maybe my community, maybe the bigger neighborhood, and then, so it does expand out. So I think it's important, but not to blame yourself for everything, but then just to say, okay, how can I be better? How can I make it a little bit better? Yeah.
I just want to respond to that, because I remember hearing somebody else talking about a similar issue. It's that, sure, not to blame yourself, but also to see the interconnectedness of all actions. And he was talking about how he went to an anti-nuclear rally somewhere in Nevada, some testing sites and like that. And he was thinking about that. And he was, thinking they were on the side of the Angels and they were very anxious about protesting this. And he thought, well, the only reason why they were able to have the rally was because this road system was laid out for them, and they had these cars where they could drive to this rally to do this, and they had a very materialistically advanced culture where they could take time off from their work in order to go to this rally. And so, in a sense, they were able to do this because of the things that they were protesting against.
Right.
And they just had to realize, not blame themselves, but also just realize that these things are connected and that we can't absolve ourselves of responsibility too, or say we don't benefit from the things that we see as so important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And not only are all the things interconnected, also due to karma, these causes and conditions, which is another conversation, but is that we're all interconnected. And once you start to realize that, you're not going to be unkind to the next person, because that's going to hurt me ultimately. So there's no point. So it's a really nice feeling, to have about everybody. I wanted to just finish with this meditation that I love, that I just somehow thought this would really, we'll just do a brief one, that would really be nice here. And some of you probably heard of Tong Lin, giving and taking. And I love this meditation, and it was, my teacher actually gave me this sheet on it, and it actually started out as a meditation for AIDS. He gave it to one of his students with AIDS, and it was supposed to have had great results. And it's for anyone with illness, and it's for anyone who's healthy, and I like to do this meditation a lot, for me to remember how on a meditative state I can help people as well. So just relax however you're comfortable. And we're going to work with, if you happen to have a sickness, you can visualize that, or I tend to visualize my sickness as my self-cherishing. So your self-concern. So basically, if you want to visualize that as basically a dark ball at your heart. So at the very center of your heart is this dark ball of your selfishness. And imagine in the space all around you. You can just imagine all the people in this room, or you can imagine all sentient beings filling every space. They're all in human form, and they're all sitting here with you doing this meditation. And we're going to get an opportunity to help them now. And so just spend a couple of minutes to think about their suffering. So it could be the suffering of any hospice patients still in this house, or anyone in this room, or any of the other people, beings that you visualized. And imagine all of their suffering, whatever experience of suffering they have. It comes out of their right nostril in the form of a purple stream of light, and it enters you through your left nostril. And it goes right down into the knot of self-cherishing. Completely destroys it. So just visualize as you inhale, taking out all their suffering in the form of this purple light, out their right nostril, into your left nostril, destroying the ball of selfishness. completely destroys your selfishness. And you can pray that, can your suffering replace theirs? Just see how that feels for a moment. Can I take on their suffering? And now this knot of selfishness at your heart is completely destroyed. You're completely free of suffering, and you'd like to give them, all these sentient beings, all the happiness you feel, all the positive energy you feel. You're going to give it away to them. So this leaves you from your right nostril in the form of golden rays of light, like the sun. Completely gleaming, sparkling, and it enters them through their left nostril. Completely fills them entirely with bliss and happiness. And in this space of being completely free and clear of all of our suffering, we can dedicate all the merit or positive energy that we've created from spending this time together to helping us have a better understanding of Bodichitta, and whatever seed of Bodichitta that we have in us can grow and develop, so we can ultimately, in an unlimited way, work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I think the next order of business is anyone who wants to speak to Alan. Could you first perhaps explain to one about the wonderful space to which we're going?
TBF has always met here as well as I know. I came into TBF in '92 and it was meeting here, so I assume it was meeting here in '91. So this was a very special space, and when we got the letter from the Zen Hospice, sort of a cool letter in a way, but nice letter saying, please think about moving on, but gentle. It was a little bit of a shock, but then we said, well, there must be other spaces. And we got a list together and we divided it up and people were phoning. And then we got a phone call from the San Francisco Buddhist Center, which is a center of the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order based in England. And there's several teachers there, 4 teachers who are, I don't know if they're all English, but the 2 we interacted with were English. And they were on our mailing list, and they called us, and they said, we really would like to have you use our space. We don't use it on Sunday, and we've just redone it, and so on. So they all went so easily, and I think that was the nice thing about it, because we visualized the struggle, that this was going to be hard to get a space, and we went to different spaces, we got a lot of no's, and then this very generous offer came. I went over and looked at it, and the group of the steering committee went over and looked at it, and it's a marvelous space. It's big. I think it's twice as big as this. It's got a big reception area in front where we can have tea and talk, and we don't have to shh anybody, which has been we realized why this was so here, but it wasn't a pleasant thing to have to do. And that space will absorb a very open sort of conversation and interaction. So it's for the same price, and it's in a very lively part of town, as I described in the newsletter. It's between 21st and 22nd and Valencia and Mission. So we feel it just was a natural transition, and we're delighted to be able to make it next month.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.